Welcome to Pod Like a Champion, the blueandgold.com recruiting podcast. It's Tuesday, October 13th, 2020. I'm Patrick Engel, joined as always by our recruiting insider, Mike Singer. Mike, big week on the Notre Dame recruiting beat for you. You went to Indianapolis to see two Notre Dame offensive line commits, Blake Fisher, Joey Tonona. Their teams played each other. So let's hear your thoughts. What did you see when you saw Blake Fisher and Joey Tonona's teams face off in the greater Indianapolis area last week?
Yeah, real quick. You mentioned it's Tuesday, October 13th. You would have just thought with this year it would have been on a Friday of Halloween month. It would have been Friday, October 13th.
Every day is the 13th with
this year. Yeah, so planning travel for this year as a recruiting reporter has been super difficult because there's just COVID cancellations left and right. Prince Collie's game. If I would have gone there this past Friday, I wouldn't have been able to see a game because it got canceled. So luckily, I haven't had that with any of my travel plans yet. So before the start of the season, that was the game. I was like, I have to go here. Blake Fisher versus Joey Tonona. I haven't been able to see either guy in person. Patrick, you did over the summer. You saw Fisher just dominate children in Fort Wayne. So this is my first time getting to see him. So I get to Avon, and this with our staff writer, Mason Plummer. He goes to Ball State, so he was local, so he joined me. So also my first time meeting Mason in person, which was awesome. Really good dude. Follow him on Twitter, Mason, at Mason Plummer _ So we interview the coaches, Jared Johnson, Mark Bless, great dudes there at Avon, offensive line coach and head coach respectively. And then I asked Coach Johnson, hey, is Blake around? I mean, it's two and a half hours at that point before the start of the game. He's like, yeah, let me go grab him. And I see this monstrosity of a man wearing a green Notre Dame hoodie walk out. And he must have thought I just saw a ghost. I'm just in awe. And I had my camera, so I'm like, hey, Blake, let's go outside and get a couple pictures. I snapped some photos of him. And I must have seemed like a nut job to Blake. I mean, I've been talking to Blake for a couple of years now. But never met him in person, had that face-to-face interaction with him. So he was probably like, man, this guy's really weird because Blake is just so freaking big and he carries his weight really well. I mean, he's, 320, 330, and it's like, he looks like, and it's all good. Like it doesn't look like there's any bad weight there. So dude is a beast. And I'll talk about what I saw from them during the game, but I want to go quickly to after the game. So Joey Tonona is Notre Dame's 2022 offensive line commit. He's ranked as the number 169 player in the country. Blake Fisher's, of course, in the 2021 class, ranked as a 5-star, number 19 overall recruit nationally. So those two guys sought each other out right after the game and spent some time talking to each other. So that was really cool as a reporter, getting to see them interact face-to-face for the first time as Notre Dame commits. But what really stood out was how freaking big Joey was. He's listed at 6'5", 290. He told me he's 6'5", 292. So, right there, he probably wavers between 290 295. And, Blake's got, 20, 30 pounds on Joey, but they look just as big. They look the same size. So, they both played. So now we'll get into the game. They both played center, which if you would have told me that 4 months ago, I'd been like, what the heck are you talking about? So Tonona played left tackle his sophomore year. Love his tape. We've had Mike Goolsby, former Notre Dame linebacker and captain, break down Tonona in a previous podcast episode. And he absolutely, I think of the 6 recruits we had Goolsby break down in that podcast, he loved Tonona the most. But Scott Turnquist, the head coach at Zionsville, moved him to center I mean, they run like a spread, like a kind of a modern day normal passing attack. And, I guess for them, it was most important for him. That need was at center. I quite don't understand it. But, I respect that move. So it was different. I wouldn't have expected to see that caliber of player playing center. Typically, you don't really recruit centers. You typically recruit a guard or a tackle who ends up playing center. And I don't think Tenona is going to be playing center at Notre Dame. He could, but I'm sorry, Patrick?
No.
Yeah, no, I mean,
did not see that.
that's not a slight on someone like Jarrett Patterson, who I believe was recruited as a tackle moving to center. He's done such a good job. He's going to be playing in the NFL, I believe. So I'm not trying to take a slight at centers, but at the high school level, you don't put your best offensive lineman typically at center. But Tenona was really good. And for the exclusive highlights of Tenona, Fisher, as well as Mason and myself breaking down the game, if you're already watching via YouTube, you know how to find our YouTube channel, so you can watch those videos. If you're listening via podcast, just search Blue and Gold Illustrated on YouTube, and you can watch all those videos. So you can watch exactly what I'm talking about. But Tenona did really good job. As a center and pass protection, I don't think it's as action-packed because you're typically double-teaming somebody, assisting your guards. But, there were certainly some pancakes in the run game, and overall was impressed with him. He's a big dude who moves really well, and he packs a punch. That's what I wanted to see, and that's what we got from Joey Tenona. So Notre Dame is getting a really good offensive lineman in the 2022 class. Now, Fisher, again, I mentioned both of these guys played center. So Avon's starting center was out for this game. So they didn't feel comfortable moving anyone else to center. So they asked Blake to move from left tackle to center. And Blake struggled with some snaps. I mean, they told him like Wednesday of game week. And, of course, the game's on Friday night. So he had to quickly start practicing snaps, something he'd never done before. So, he struggled naturally, in the live game setting. I'm sure practicing his snapping, it went well, but it's just a different beast when you're actually doing it in the game. So there were some struggles, but his blocking at center was very good. He moved very well laterally. For as big as he is, it's like unbelievable how athletic Blake Fisher is. Well, late in the third quarter, Avon moved Blake back to left tackle, and that's when you started to see some of these just demolishing dudes and embarrassing people, just easily pancaking them. And at one point, he pushed a dude. It looked like the guy, like, on purpose, jumped backwards to fall on the ground, like it was an act. But no, that was just Blake Fisher.
That's less embarrassing. That's a better outcome than getting shoved to the ground by Blake.
Blake just kind of it wasn't some big forceful push. At least that's not how it looked, and the dude just went flying. Mason tweeted it out. I'm laughing in the background after the play, and our other staff writer, Andrew Mentok, tweets at Mason. He says, "Is that a Mike Singer laugh in the background?" I was like, yes.
Your laugh of just at this poor defensive lineman's expense.
Yeah, I remember talking to the Avon coaches before the game, and they were kind of joking. I don't know who's going to be like having more stronger emotion. The defensive tackle who sees Blake Fisher at center and how upset he's going to be, or the defensive end who now doesn't have to go up against Blake and how excited he is. Well, kind of sucked for both because Blake ended up playing both positions. But, all in all, it was a really strong performance by both guys.
So like Mike mentioned, if you're watching on YouTube, please go. You can easily find those videos on there. If you're not, go to our YouTube channel, Blue and Gold Illustrated. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to YouTube, hit that thumbs up button, like the video. On the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe to the pod, leave us 5 stars and nice comments if you like what you hear. We'll love you forever. And subscribe to blueandgold.com. We'll also love you forever. Follow us on Twitter at Patrick Engel _ENGEL, and follow Mike at Rivals_Singer. All right. Got that boilerplate stuff out of the way. And to react to what you just said, Mike, the takeaway that when you mentioned that Joey looks the part like next to Blake as if he's is big, and that's pretty good. I mean, the kid's a junior, and the first thing you notice about Blake is just how physically dominating and imposing he is. As much height as it is, size in general. I mean, I think he's listed at 6'6". That it looks pretty
6'6",
accurate.
330. Yeah, it was.
And the 6'6" looks accurate, and it jumps out at you as much as the size in general. So for Tanona to be in that same physical class as 16 or 17, you have to like as a college offensive lineman starter kid. And I had not seen Tanona in person. So anything that gets in that size realm of Blake, I think is the very first thing you want to see, and it sure sounds like is already kind of checked that box.
And like you mentioned, Tanona's a year younger than Blake, or at least a grade younger. I don't know their exact birthdays, but he's got a full another year to grow. He's just a junior. Blake's a senior now, but I mean, don't sleep on Tanona. The dude's not a big social media guy, so he's not, tweeting shamrock and winky emojis to get the fans excited like Blake might. But don't sleep on Tanona because he's a beast in his own right.
So speaking of Twitter, Notre Dame Twitter games, we're going to segue into our conversation with a well-known member of Notre Dame recruiting Twitter and a parent of another Notre Dame commit, Yolanda Jackson, the mother of Notre Dame four-star commit Deion Colzie. Really excited to welcome Yolanda in. Of course, Deion recommitted Notre Dame in late September. The receiver out of Georgia, initially committed back in the fall of 2019 before reopening things in, I believe it was late March, kind of right after everything shut down. So with that, let's welcome in Yolanda Jackson.
Joining us now on Pod Like a Champion is Yolanda Jackson, who is the mother of Deion Colzie, a four-star wide receiver commitment in the Notre Dame 2021 class. So a couple of weeks ago on our last show, we had Mark Spindler come on, the father of Rocco Spindler, another Irish commit. And maybe 2 or 3 hours after we posted that podcast, I get a text from Yolanda saying, Mike, I want to come on your next show. And it's really funny, Yolanda. I had 2 emails and one person messaged me on Twitter saying, love the interview with Mark. You need to get Yolanda on there. And my response was, I don't know if Yolanda would want to. I'll reach out to her. I didn't even have to reach out to her because she reached out to me. Yolanda, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
You're welcome.
So you're currently in Augusta, Georgia. I think a lot of people just kind of figure that Deion is an Athens kid because he goes to Athens Academy, but he's from South Atlanta. And then you moved out to Augusta. For those who don't know where Augusta, Georgia is, it's basically on the Georgia-South Carolina border. Of course, Deion is still in Athens. Just kind of break down, what is that like? With Deion, 2 hours away, you're in Augusta. How hard is that on you?
Well, I'm used to it now, actually, because it's kind of been the case ever since he started going to Athens Academy. So I'm really used to him not being here. I do get to see him every Friday because I try to make every single game. I think since he's been playing, I've only missed, I think, 1 game, maybe 2. So I get to see him every Friday, get to see him every weekend. So it's prepared me, though, for him going away to college. So it won't be as hard on me when he gets ready to go to Notre Dame. Because I've gotten used to him kind of not being here. It is hard, though, as a mom, as a parent, not having him around, but it makes me appreciate our time together that much more when I do get a chance to see him. So I would say it's not bad.
For our YouTube audience, you guys can see Mrs. Jackson's awesome Notre Dame shirt, and she's even got a poster of Deion in Notre Dame gear. You pretty excited that he? I want to say that maybe you're a Notre Dame fan or something like that.
Yeah, maybe this much.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. I am. I did want to clear one thing up. I saw on one of the interviews that I think it was GPB did with Deion, and I think she said that he was born and raised in Athens, which he was not.
Right.
So I do want to clear that up. Like you said, he is from Atlanta. We're from Atlanta.
McDonough
in
the house.
In the house. So we're from McDonough. So I just wanted to clear that up, that, he is from, south of Atlanta, and not born and raised in Athens. We just chose to send him to Athens Academy. That's all.
You want to know who else is born in McDonough, Georgia? Me. I'm also.
You.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, that's where I grew up. So how about that?
Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry. You asked me another question. What?
Patrick, I know I just asked you about if you're a little Notre Dame fan. Patrick's got something else for you though.
Oh, let me answer that because I need people to know.
Okay.
I am a huge Notre Dame fan, and I have been for as long as I've been a football fan, which is a very long time. So definitely a Notre Dame fan. So
given that, and obviously you've heard about the school and have followed the team to a degree since before Deion was started getting recruited by them. And one thing we kind of heard all throughout the recruitment and even after Deion reopened things was your comfort with Notre Dame that was there early on and still kind of remained there even after he initially decommitted. Why did that really kind of persist and remain? And I'm sure it was one of the reasons that Deion never stopped considering Notre Dame even when he reopened things.
Well, for me, we actually sat down and we talked with Deion like the night before he decommitted. We actually had a family communication about his decision or him wanting to decommit. And one of the things that we told him was, listen, if this is what you really want to do, you need to make sure that you call Coach Kelly personally and let him know what your intentions are. And I think, and he did that. And the fact that Notre Dame actually ramped up their recruitment of him after he decommitted. And I heard from Coach Reese, from Coach Dale Alexander, from Coach Kelly, that all his decommitment meant was that they were going to have to recruit him harder. And they did that and never stopped. So out of respect, for them just not giving up, I thought, this is serious. They really do, want him because, as Mike has reported before, there was a time when Deion was not very responsive to Notre Dame at all. And they could have easily given up. And then there were even times, when it was reported that, when it was reported about his top three that, they weren't a part of the top three that was reported. And they could have easily given up, but they didn't. They stuck with it, and he ended up back there. And so it's a win-win for everybody.
The top three you mentioned, I remember that was an interview with Chad Simmons of Rivals, and it was Alabama, Florida, and Tennessee. And
right.
Yolanda, what you're saying, I've praised the Notre Dame staff as well in our shows and in articles of what I was told in March, and I'm sure you were told this as well, Yolanda, was that Notre Dame was going to continue to recruit your son as long as there was a pulse. As long they were eliminated from the top group, they didn't care. We're going to still recruit you until you signed or you tell us, I am not going to Notre Dame, stop contacting me. Unless that happened, maybe they would have still even recruited Deion if that happened, but they kept on him.
Yeah, they did. And I have a lot of respect, for them for that. But for me as a parent and me personally, what that showed me was that they really believed in the two-way process. And I mean, they believe that Deion, is a good fit for Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is a good fit for Deion. And so when I saw that, it just kind of amped up my love for the school even more, because in my contact with them, they just kept preaching that to me. We still believe that Deion's a good fit for Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is a good fit for Deion. So, kudos to them for staying on top of that.
So you had mentioned there for a minute that there was a period where Deion was unresponsive for a bit, and I imagine that was kind of the case with a lot of the schools that were recruiting him. And I'll never blame a recruit for wanting to try to step back for a minute. I'm sure this is a hectic thing that every day of lots of people getting in contact with you and wanting to recruit you. From where kind of you were standing as a parent and being involved in the recruitment itself, how did you observe kind of the process wearing on him to a degree, or just kind of getting to the point where it's a lot and a lot to kind of deal with on a daily basis?
It was a learning curve for us, actually, because before his decommitment, I was very hands-on in the recruitment process. And that's not to say Deion, wasn't handling his business himself, but I was very hands-on. And then what I found out after he decommitted was that, and this kind of came up in our family conversation, was that, I needed to take a step back and let him kind of maneuver the process. So it was a learning curve for me. And it was hard for me to do that, but I realized that in order for him to make a decision that was best for him, I had to step away a little bit and allow him to do that. And so we did. After his decommitment, we didn't, bother him much about the recruiting process and what was going on. Every now and then I would just kind of check in and say, hey, what schools have you heard from? How's everything going? But I left everything really up to him and let him handle it. One thing he did say he was going to do, and he did do, was every single time he got an offer from, another school, he would always call us and let us know before he put it out on social media. He would call and say, hey, I got an offer from Auburn, or I got an offer from whoever. So he would call and let us know, before he put it out. So I appreciated that. So we really tried not to bug him, because we knew that he was being absolutely bombarded by coaches, by, a lot of the recruiting analysts and all of that stuff. So we kind of stepped away from it, and it turned out for the better.
As a reporter who covered Deion pretty closely, I knew that, okay, if he's not getting back to college coaches, he ain't getting back to me. So I just stopped trying to talk to Deion. I went out to Athens. I made that quick 1.5 hour drive. I'll just go see him in person.
Right.
So for you taking a step back, Yolanda, and he still picked the school that you really wanted, that had to have been just so satisfying. And also, like, hey, maybe I did something right in raising this kid if he picked this school.
The funny part about the whole situation was the very first time we visited Notre Dame, which was back when Deion was a sophomore.
Ball State,
the Ball State
2018.
game.
Yep.
The very first time we visited and we walked the campus, one of the things he told me was, he was like, I really like it here. It feels like home. And we had always told him that whenever you get to the point where you start visiting schools, you will know the one that's right for you, because you'll feel it. And so he felt that the very first time we stepped on campus, and for me that was huge, but him recommitting was it was a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise. I know. Because of course he told us maybe about a couple of weeks before he put his video out. And I'll never forget, it was really funny because I was sitting and we were FaceTiming each other. I had on a matter of fact, I might have had this shirt on. And so he was like, Mom, you want to know where I'm going? And I was like, yeah, I guess. And so he said, oh, you don't really want to know then. Never mind. And I said, no, tell me. So he said, look down. So I started looking at the floor and I was like, look down, what's on the floor? And then he started laughing and he was like, Mom, no, look down. So I finally looked down at my shirt and I was like, are you serious? And then he said, yeah. And so I was just like, I was, nothing on this earth could have spoiled that day for me after that. So I was pretty happy.
That's 2 weeks in a row, Mike, or 2 podcasts in a row, I should say, where we've heard some
awesome
pretty
stories.
Cool, inside, behind the scenes stories of when the recruits have told their parents.
Who's the next parent to be on this podcast? We need more. These are awesome.
Well, we have to find out what Tyler Buckner's parents thought when sophomore year Tyler told him, "Yep, I want to do this and I want to commit here." Yeah, this is some interesting inside baseball stuff here. But to get back to one thing you had touched on a little bit earlier was, and the kind of lots of coaches and bombardment to a degree. And I remember you told Mike, or maybe it was Deion that did. I can't remember specifically, that Notre Dame had been in the most consistent contact with him after the decommitment. How did you observe, or at least from what he had told you, observe of staying in contact to let him know that we're still interested, we'd still like you, but not trying to go overboard? I'm sure that's a thing that most recruits encounter, of just maybe over persistence to a degree. But I'm kind of curious how you observe them toe the line on the right side of it. So it seems.
Well, with that, I would have to give a bunch of credit to Coach Dale Alexander. I was in contact, or they were in contact with me at least, if not every week, every other week, I would hear from somebody. Whether it was Coach Alexander or Coach Reese, just checking in, how's the family, just, and the reason why I say I owe a lot to Coach Alexander was because he let the new relationship or the new communication, he let it happen naturally. And so he wasn't pushy with Deion. He would tell me that he would, put little feelers out there, send Deion different little things, little, inspirational things, maybe send himself. And he just kind of kept those feelers out there, but was never pushy about it. And I think that played a big part in Deion's appreciation for how they recruited him as well, too, because it wasn't one of those things, where they were very pushy about, you need to come on back to us or anything like that. And I think in the long run that, that had to play a big role in his decision as well, is that they just allowed that new relationship to develop naturally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really kind of illustrates how recruiting is an art and a science, at least from the coach's standpoint, of every case is going to be different, and you have to be good at kind of reading the room, I guess.
With some recruits, Patrick, they're upset if they are only getting contacted once a week, and with Deion, he did, like, the best way to recruit him was to not overwhelm him. So yeah, more kudos to them. And also I want to add real quick for Patrick X's next question.
Okay.
I'm sure Notre Dame knew that you were taking a step back, whether they sensed that or you told them. But they still wanted to recruit you because you were now a part of they wanted you as a part of their family. It wasn't we need to sway you, and we already know she wants Notre Dame. They didn't have to talk to you anymore. They already know where you stood. But it was really, from my perspective and talking to you in different sources, it felt like they wanted you as a part of that family.
Right.
So I love that about Notre Dame's
Yeah.
Deion.
Yeah. It was sweet. I'll just say that.
So after Deion had initially decommitted, lots of projections or musings kind of had Georgia as one, what he might have been leaning toward, favorite, whatever term you want to put on it. Obviously didn't end up going that way. I'm just kind of curious how you saw that play out and kind of what the appeal would have been there, but ultimately what led things to go back to Notre Dame instead of Georgia.
I think that the only thing I would say in regards to that is, of course, after he decommitted, a lot of people had him pegged for Georgia because he's in Georgia's backyard. Naturally, that is what a lot of people thought. And he had a chance to visit Georgia on several occasions, and we visited with him on a couple of occasions and went to some games and everything too. But for me, it just goes to show that you just never know with recruiting how things are going to happen. Because I will also say, in the very early stages, like right after he decommitted, Frank and I we kind of thought he might end up at Georgia. We actually talked about it ourselves, that there's a chance he really might end up at Georgia. But one of the things that we told Deion was, regardless of where he ended up, we were going to always support him 100%, because he has to be comfortable, he has to be happy with his decision, because he's the one that has to go to school, he's the one that has to put in the work to play a game that he loves to play, that he's been playing since he was 4 years old. So at the end of the day, he has to do what's best for him. And as parents, we still, tried to guide him and tell him the things that we thought he should be thinking about when he wanted to choose a school, with education being the first one. But ultimately, it had to be his decision.
And you mentioned Frank. That's, of course, your husband, Frank Jackson.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so I think with the whole Georgia thing, and Georgia was recruiting him. I heard from, the receiver coach at Georgia, heard from Kirby a couple of times. But at the end of the day, Deion had mapped out how he wanted this to go, and what he was looking for and what he was monitoring in terms of, how many receivers. People don't realize Deion was really doing his homework. He was looking at how many receivers are already there, how many receivers are ahead of me, how many receivers are they taking in my class. So a lot of people don't know that Deion's a student of the game. So all of that played into, his decision, because ultimately with any athlete, you want to play. You don't want to sit behind somebody for 2 years, so you want to put yourself in the best position to be able to hit that field as early as possible. So, but that was what it was with Georgia.
Now, before we let you go, Yolanda, I got to ask one more question. So my last time I've sat down with you, which was right before Deion committed, I asked you, when has it set in? Because this was before he had announced his commitment, but he had told you. I asked, is it set in that Deion is committed? And you told me, I think it will, once he signs. Well, here you are wearing your Notre Dame shirt. You got the poster of Deion and from his Notre Dame visit behind you, and you get to see that every day. So I'm going to ask the same question. Has it set in that your son's committed to Notre Dame now?
It has. It has. It has sank in a little bit more. And I think I don't think, I know we're in the home stretch to signing day now. So
It's close.
once we get there and he signs, then, that's that. But he's not going to be changing his mind. So we're in the home stretch preparing for signing day.
Well, Yolanda, thank you so much for joining this episode of Pod Like a Champion. I'm looking forward to going back out to Athens, probably for a playoff game, because Athens guys always making a playoff run. So I will come back out and catch a playoff game, hopefully state title game too.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited. I am glad to be an almost official part of the Notre Dame family. And I tell you, I will say this though, we are so stoked that we have already, I think you might have reported it, but we've already purchased our tickets and flights for every single game next year, home and away.
Yeah,
I think I read that in The Athletic. Pete Sampson. Yeah, that was awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, so we are ready to go and excited.
All right, before we let you go, I got to sneak in one more thing. Yolanda, tell me about your Twitter following, because Notre Dame fans love you. They absolutely love you. When I'm writing articles and about Deion, I'm like kind of teasing, where's he going to go? And of course, the article doesn't directly answer that, but,
right.
try to do my best job on that. You're retweeting it to kind of throw people hints and whatnot. Tell me about your Twitter game, because the Notre Dame fans listening to this, they love you, and you know that.
I don't really have a plan, just because I'm a huge Notre Dame fan. It's almost like anything on Twitter that's Notre Dame, I pretty much will retweet it to just kind of show and solidify how huge of a Notre Dame fan I really am. But I don't know. I didn't realize that people, follow me or love me like that. I never knew that.
Oh, they do. They do.
Fans on Twitter are full force.
This podcast is going to do huge numbers. We're going to make sure in the headline of this podcast that your name is in there. So, absolutely.
Well, that's very interesting. That's wow. That's all I can say. I don't know. I don't do anything really intentional other than I am intentionally retweeting anything about Notre Dame. But maybe too, because, I can get a little feisty if you get out of pocket.
I'm happy I never crossed that bridge.
Yes, that's sort of like, when he first decommitted and, people say what they want to say. And, I'm mindful about what I say. But, I'll just, I had to tell somebody one time, just watch your mouth. That's my son. If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything.
I remember
that. But maybe that's it. I don't know. And I like to keep it real. That's just me. I like to keep it real. I like to tell people from a real perspective, how things are going. But for me, like I told Deion that before he made his decision, this was a while back, it didn't matter to me where he ended up, although I definitely wanted him to come back to Notre Dame. But I told him at my house, there was always going to be a Notre Dame flag and the flag of wherever he went. So luckily, just one flag flying at my house, and that's the Notre Dame flag, which I have.
Well, Yolanda, thank you again so much for joining this episode of Pod Like a Champion.
Thank you, guys. You guys stay safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, and socially distance. All right?
Well, we'll do, Yolanda.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. And to the Twitter fans, thank you.
A lot of great stuff in there and great insight from Yolanda, and never ceases to be a really just informative kind of thing when you get to talk to parents and go really deep into how recruitments came together. Everyone is different and has different ebbs, flows, turning points, key moments, whatever you might call it. And in an interesting way, the decommitment almost seemed like, maybe not in the moment, but a turning point in Notre Dame's approach that in the long term paid off. And maybe in hindsight, you wouldn't certainly say this in the moment, but did the decommitment help Notre Dame's chances of getting him signed in the long term? Just because of, like we said, they changed the approach to it. And even if he did decommitted or not, you knew there were going to be others still involved, still recruiting him, what have you. He's obviously a coveted player from SEC territory who's, as the offer list would tell you, good enough to play in the SEC. So I wonder just if that wake-up call of let's tweak some things, not that we necessarily did anything wrong, but tweak things from the Notre Dame staff standpoint, again, to put myself in their headspace, or at least attempt to, was something that long-term benefited them. Just kind of thinking out loud here, but just I couldn't help but wonder that for a minute.
I'm going to think out loud from the Deion side of things, and that it was kind of a resetting of his recruitment. And Notre Dame did a really good job, as myself and Yolanda mentioned so many times. But I also want to add, I think the pandemic helped Notre Dame because he didn't get to go out and visit any of those, the Tennessees. He never visited Tennessee, which was one of his finalists. The other was Florida, which he visited like 2 years ago. So maybe even if he was able to trip to Alabama. So I'm not saying that if the pandemic didn't happen, he wouldn't be with Notre Dame. Still might be the case, but it's interesting to kind of think about, well, he's visited Notre Dame 4 or 5 times. What if he, was able to visit some of those other schools and get comfortable with them as well? So that's one point. A couple other things I want to mention, Patrick, before we move on. Such a cool thing about my job and how I approach it is seeing these people in person. And like we talked about Blake Fisher and Joey Tannone, I got to meet both of their parents, talk to their coaches, meet the kids. Like, I love that part of it. So much of this job is remote, as I'm sitting here in Atlanta and you're in South Bend. But that face-to-face stuff is so cool. And now I get to consider Yolanda as a good friend. She already has texted me since she got off and said, I love that so much. Let me know when I can listen. So, Notre Dame recruits such great kids, and the parents, are great. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree when you're looking at these recruits and their parents. I love covering. I've covered a lot of different schools, and I mean, Notre Dame is easily the favorite school I've covered because of the high quality people that you deal with. I can't speak highly enough about that.
Yeah, you can definitely see the thoroughness and rigor of thought that they brought to a difficult decision, and a one that, when you look at just big picture of commit to school, is kind of a thing like, how do I do this? What are the things I break it down into? So the approach that they took with that definitely stood out as something that was well thought out. And yeah, you definitely won't mistake this recruitment for being anything as rash decision, rushed, whatever. And like you said, to touch on the pandemic and in Notre Dame's recruitment, just kind of goes to show every school will have recruits that it helped them with. Everyone will have recruits that it hurt them with.
Yes, absolutely.
Notre Dame example, yeah, Will Shipley, I'm sure it definitely didn't help.
Right.
Deion, I think you laid out a great case for why it did.
Lorenzo Styles.
Another good one. Yep. And I think it certainly helps with keeping kids committed. Obviously Deion's a different example of that, but even then a different type of uncommitted kid because of the prior commitment and whatnot. But yeah, there's just all kinds of different variables thrown into a thing that already is, no two recruitments are alike. So it's all kind of guesswork, speculation on, okay, how much did it help or hurt? But it's certainly fair to wonder, because you have a big element of recruiting that's not there in visits. So just a weird thing that you'll take the benefits where you can get them and just kind of shrug when things don't go your way because of the factor everybody's dealing with.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No two recruitments are the same. I was going to mention that. That's one of my favorite sayings. And she said, you just don't really realize, just you don't know with recruits and what they're going to do. If you would have, I had people joking with me, Mike, why are you going to see a Georgia commit? Like, do you regularly feature Georgia commits on our Notre Dame website? Because that's when I went and saw Deion in July for his workout at his high school. And my response was, I don't decide who Notre Dame is going to recruit. If they're recruiting this kid hard, I'm going to cover him. It's not my choice to decide if they're going to get him. I'm just going to cover the kid. So, it worked out at the end.
Always be ready for twists and turns.
Yes.
All right. So with that, let's get into some questions here before the last little segment. Got some, like you solicited some questions on Twitter. We got some on the message board. We picked a few here. So let's just jump right in. First one here from the message board. OCND fan 81 shouts to you for asking us a question. Who is Notre Dame's next commit? I'm getting bored with all this actual football.
Yeah, of course this question is going to be asked anytime you open it up. So
what they want.
Yeah, so we'll look at 2021 first. So Notre Dame has maybe 2, maybe 3 spots left. So you're not looking at a crazy finish here. There's not going to be 6 more commitments unless. I shouldn't rule anything out. It is recruiting and it is 2020, but so you're looking at 2 to 3 more is my educated guess at this point. And there's just not that many guys. So if you're looking at who's your next commit in 2021, it's more likely than not one of the following, unless Notre Dame offers some new guys that, which is certainly possible as well. So you look at the 2 in Hawaii, Kahanu Kia, 6'2", 205 pound linebacker at Punahou in Honolulu. He's certainly someone to keep an eye on. Notre Dame's been doing a really good job since they offered him September 1st, but Stanford and Utah. His father played at Utah. He also loves Stanford. So those are kind of the 3 schools that I'm really watching out for that recruitment. And then you have Titus Makayo Altamalala. No idea if I pronounced that correctly, but that's a 4-star athlete, 6'1", 165 pounds. I want to say that weight. I think he might be closer to 180 now. I might want to check with him on that. But that's a big-time athlete. Notre Dame is looking at him more so on the defensive side of the ball, but he could be a big-time receiver, and Rivals actually lists him as receiver. So that's one to keep an eye on. His recruitment's been tough to read because he's got a top 10 that he announced last month. But now that the dead period's extended through the rest of the year, he's kind of like holding out hope that he'll be able to take some visits. He can't, so he could really pop any time. Like, there's really nothing for him to do now. It's just what if he wants to keep learning more about schools or, keep being, courted by some of these coaches. I don't know, but there's nothing for him to do left to just make a decision. He's been recruited by these schools for months and months and months. So, Nebraska, Michigan, Notre Dame, maybe Hawaii, Utah, USC. Like, there's just a lot of schools that I could – Maryland even with the Tagovailoa connection. So there's just a bunch of different schools I could realistically see him ending up at. I have my FutureCast picking for Notre Dame. I can't say I'm super confident in it, but this is just a recruitment where he could commit today. He could wait until sign day. I just don't know right now. Sources I talk to don't really have a good idea. But I mentioned with Yolanda's interview, Patrick, that Notre Dame told Deion, we're going to recruit you until we can't anymore. That's the same thing with Titus. Notre Dame's going to have a spot for Titus. They're going to keep recruiting him no matter what. So that's why I put in that pick. I called it at the time I did it. I called it a projection pick because it's not like I knew anything was imminent. So I just kind of threw something at the wall to see if it sticks. Not really, but kind of. with that one, and I think that Notre Dame will end up winning the recruitment. I think they're going to outlast these other schools. So that's on the 2021 side. I hope that answers your question, OC ND Fan 81. On the 2022 side, there's a lot of recruits. Okay. With the 2021 class, kids were pushing up their decision timelines because they couldn't take visits. With 2022, it's the opposite. We can't take visits. We're going to push it back. We have more time on our side here. So someone like Steve Angeli, the quarterback from New Jersey, I think in a normal year, he would have already been committed by now. Obviously, Notre Dame would have not even waited until August to offer quarterbacks. They'd have offered him the spring after seeing them in person, of course, during a normal cycle. So Notre Dame's got, 3 class of 2022 commits already. I think during a normal year it would probably be 5 or 6 by this point. So, but in terms of who's next, maybe Angeli, Billy Schrelf, the offensive lineman from Wisconsin. There's probably a couple linebackers, Sebastian Cheeks, maybe Jake Pope in Georgia. Well, Pope's kind of a rover safety. I think he might play safety, but end his career at a linebacker, as we've seen some guys do in the Brian Kelly era. So, is that enough names? I can't tell you who's next to commit, but I hope that's a good enough answer.
Possibilities, but yeah, like you mentioned, might be a long haul thing with 2022 at least. All right, next one here is from Christian Bogan on Twitter. Seeing how effective Chris Tyree and Kyron Williams have been in the run game, which running backs that Notre Dame is targeting now have the same type of ability, and who could Notre Dame realistically land, especially from that type of running back group?
Yeah, I first want to mention, around the time Will Shipley commits to Clemson, it's like everyone's just on Notre Dame and Lance Taylor about the running back recruiting strategy. Have you heard any of that recently? Has people kind of moved on, Patrick? No one's really talking about that anymore, whether it's on message boards. What's that?
A lot of silence about that.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where in my life, I have a terrible memory, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, I remember it, at the back of my head. Like, hey, no one's complaining about Jeff Quinn anymore. Notre Dame got Logan Diggs, the first guy they offered after Will Shipley commits to Clemson, and people like Logan Diggs. Like, hey, Diggs has a little bit more wiggle than a guy like Will Shipley. Hey, maybe we even like Diggs more than Shipley. So. I know Mike Goolsby, who I mentioned earlier, is a bigger Diggs fan than Shipley. But so does Diggs have the same type of ability as Tyree and Williams? He's a different kind of back. Tyree and Williams almost look the same. They had the similar numbers, 23 and 25, and they also have similar builds. Would you say that, Patrick, when you're live at those games?
Yeah, that's about right. I mean,
because you can't tell a difference sometimes.
No. They list Kyron at 5'9", Tyree at 5'10". Yeah, they're about the same. I think maybe Kyron's a little heavier in a good way, but it's about the same.
Yeah, I mean Kyron's been in the program for over a year, and Tyree's been in it for 3 months, so that would make sense that he's. But in terms of that kind of ability. And looking at Diggs specifically, he's more of a bigger, not like a big back. He's not running out there 6'2", 220. He's about 6 foot 190, but he just looks for contact. He loves hitting people like that. He's that kind of back. So I think he's going to be pretty fun to watch. In terms of 2022 running backs, who's this? Mr. Bogan or Bogan? I don't know what your last name is, how you say that. But Notre Dame's offered 10 or 11 running backs in the 2022 class. So I mentioned earlier, people were complaining about Notre Dame's 2021 running back strategy, kind of putting all the eggs in the basket of Will Shipley, which I've debunked before that wasn't the case, but we're not going to go there. But Notre Dame has offered a bunch more guys. So Taylor's taken a more different approach, and he's done a really nice job. I want to mention 2 guys that I think have this type of ability that Notre Dame is also in good contention for. One would be Nicholas Singleton from Pennsylvania, Shillington, PA, Governor Mifflin, senior. He's ranked as the number 111th player nationally, number 6 running back. Notre Dame is going to be a finalist for him when it comes down to it. He visited Notre Dame last November, and then Notre Dame asked him to come back like 2 weeks later. So they went back out there, and he got his offer. He was Notre Dame's first running back offer in the 22 class. So he's a guy to look out for. Irish have been recruiting him for 11 months now. I think he's a baller too. You know, he's got the offer list to back up right around 30 offers. He has that kind of ability. And then Dallin Hayden's the other one I want to mention. He's from Memphis, Tennessee, Christian Brothers. His dad played at Aaron Hayden. He played at Tennessee, 15, 20 years ago or so. Well, it's got to be more than 15. Yeah, 20, 25. I don't know. But he's the number 221 overall player nationally. And, he's listed at 6 foot 192. He's another one that Notre Dame's in good mix for. Even though, he's a Tennessee legacy and he's a big-time player. So Dallin Hayden, Nicholas Singleton, a couple of guys to keep an eye on. And if Notre Dame gets an early commitment from one of these big-time backs in the 22 class, let's say Singleton commits. And then you're sitting there and you're like, man, I think I could get Dallin Hayden too. Like, hey, Brian Kelly, can we take 2 backs? Like, can I get 2? So that's something to watch out for because Lance Taylor's done a really nice job of recruiting these 22 backs, and if you're in good position for more than one, I'm sure Notre Dame fans would not be upset if they get 2.
Especially because I'm not sure we're going to see Kyron Williams for a 5th year at this rate, or Chris Tyree for anything more than 4 years.
And someone like, I'm not going to speculate, but if your youngest backs are at the top of the depth chart, then your older ones, you're more likely to see a transfer. So.
Right, exactly. And all right, next here from Ryan Roberts on Twitter. Who's the most underrated recruit in Notre Dame's 2021 class? Do you believe any of the current 4-stars are in line for a late bump into 5-star status? I will give my answer on the first part really quickly. I would say it's Prince Collie. Mike, who you got? Most underrated.
Well, I want to hear your reasoning on Prince.
I don't know. I think you look at him, and maybe I can understand it as a still raw, technically learning, whatever term you want to use for that, for where he is and just playing football. But the physical tools, range, athleticism, I think are all there to be like 4-star, top 250, whatever level that you just kind of look at it and it's like, yeah, this just translates. Like those are obvious skills and traits you just notice from watching the first few minutes of him, and just things that are, this just translates. So I would say Prince Collie just because of the projectability of what you see from him on tape.
Yeah, I love Prince. I went and saw him in August, and for how Blake looks just completely physically dominant because he's just so much bigger, Collie has a similar, he's 6'2", 205, but like you look at him and you're like, you look bigger. Like he is just chiseled. He's just like standing around and he has an 8-pack. Like, he's a beast. I wouldn't go with him unless you're just talking about underrated strictly in terms of ranking, because he's not a 3-star. He's okay. Technically, per Rivals, he is a 3-star, but in my opinion, he is not a 3-star. He is at least a 5.8, and I think he's going to get there. Yeah, so if you're looking at that, if we're going to look at who are we as a Notre Dame community under ranking, I think Collie is beloved. So this is how I'm going to define it in that whole grand scheme of things. I mean, he's an All-American guy. He's got all the offers. Just Rivals might be doing a little bit of a catch-up on him and in terms of his ranking. So I think at the end of the day, he's going to be ranked as a 4-star. But my answer is Joe Alt. And If you listen to this show, Patrick, you know I love Joe Alt.
Pro Joe Alt podcast.
Oh yeah.
Not that anyone out there is an anti-Joe Alt podcast, but if you want Joe Alt love and just listen to Mike. That's literally it.
If Joe stinks in college, I will fight to the death and say that it wasn't his fault because I love Joe Alt. So this, again, if you've listened to this show, I talk about him a ton, so I don't want to get into his whole backstory, but he played tight end as a junior at 6'6", 6'7", 230 pounds, and he's now 6'7", and he's listed at 260, so he's put on 30 pounds, but I think he's probably closer to 270, and his goal by the spring is 285. So I think the world of this kid. If he's anything like his dad, John Alt, who made the same transition from tight end to offensive tackle, but he did it in college, and Joe is now doing it in high school, then Notre Dame's going to get a stud. His dad was a 2-time Pro Bowler, had an 8 or 9 year career with the Chiefs in the 90s. So I think Joe Alt's going to be a big time player. He's still I didn't know this, but he's still playing some tight end. He's basically a 6 offensive lineman, so he's it's pretty much a tackle. But he's the most athletic player on the team, so they need to throw him the football. They can't just have him block. So I love that. But of course, the question is going to be, how's he going to be when he's 300 pounds? Like going from 230 to 300 in a year and a half, 2 year span is that's going to be a big change for the young man. But his dad did it, and that doesn't mean that he's going to be able to do it too, but I feel a little bit better when you know his pedigree. He's got a brother who plays NHL and just a super athletic, competitive family. I think Joe Alt's going to be a stud. I think he's an NFL guy.
There we go. Ooh.
I do.
First.
He's the lowest ranked recruit in the class. He had 8 offers. Again, that's a 5.53 star. It's the lowest 3-star you can get, but I think he's going to be playing in the NFL one day. He's got this. He's going to have the size. His lateral ability is excellent. He's such a great athlete. Like you see him blocking on his junior tape, and he's like, "Who's this skinny kid who's just standing up everybody?" And that's Joe Alt. I love Joe Alt.
Well, there you go. Your semi-frequent Pod Like a Champion Joe Alt love fest, for lack of better.
Here's the thing.
I think you're well positioned to defend it, and he's for a 5.53 star, like you said. There's a lot to like. So, all right, rapid fire ones here, Mike. This one from @BigMac 2A's 24 on Twitter. Any new or old names popping up on the radar for 2021?
Not really. Like you had Brandon Jennings decommit from FSU the other day, and I don't think Notre Dame's going to circle back to him. It's really those the Hawaii kids I talked about in the 2021 class that are on the board. Theron Johnson, Northwestern commit. Notre Dame's trying to flip him. They're recruiting him as an athlete, whether that be corner or like a slot receiver role. You have Sierra Wright from out in LA is a big-time DB. You got Donovan Edwards, running back from Michigan. Dante Thornton, receiver from Maryland. So those are the names in terms of the old name. Like I don't think there's like names kind of recirculating on the board. In terms of new names popping up, there haven't been any offers. The last offer was Theron Johnson in mid-September to go out in the 2021 class, unless I'm just mistaking someone. So I'll say no. They're evaluating, because I'm pretty sure they're going to have to offer a couple of 2021 DBs. I think there's kind of in this evaluation, feeling out process of who would actually be interested, who would we have a shot with. So don't be surprised, especially if they offer some guys in Georgia. I know they're looking at some guys near me here in Atlanta, again, which is why I live here. So I think there will be some new names. But I'm not going to speculate too much on who just yet. I've already done that. I mean, like I said, there's a few guys in Georgia that they're looking at, and I would be surprised if they don't end up offering some new names in 2021.
Yeah, I would say that we haven't seen the last 2021 DB offer go out. Whoever that might be, just kind of where things stand in that position in particular. Yeah. All right, last one here, Mike. Rapid fire again. Where do you think Notre Dame ranks with Jake Taylor? Not the Indians catcher, but the 4-star offensive tackle from Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. 2022 tackle that they just offered.
Yeah, they offered him on Sunday, 4-star player. I just want to kind of throw out this little note on Jake. He went to the Los Angeles Rivals camp March 1st, and I had tweeted that I was going, and me and him had followed each other and never communicated. He was like, "Hey, Mike. Hey, Mr. Singer, I really want to meet you." Like, it was just that kind of kid. And I was like, "Hey, I'll be wearing a black shirt and khakis. Just come up and find me." Jake Taylor had 2 offers from that at that point, Arizona State, UCLA, or Utah. They weren't, and Notre Dame wasn't talking to him really at that point. And but the kid just sought me out, wanted to talk to me, and I'm sure part of it is because he knows I cover Notre Dame and he loves Notre Dame. So Irish offered him, and I would say they're going to be a top 3 school right there with. I want to say Clemson's offered him. Let's see. Clemson's not offered. So I believe if Clemson offers, they're going to be right up there. But otherwise, Oklahoma, Notre Dame battle right there. Patrick, there's one other question we didn't get to from Ryan Roberts. You mentioned it, but we didn't actually answer it. Do you believe any of the current 4 stars are in line for a late bump into 5-star status? Do you have any thoughts?
I'll defer to you on this one. I mean, I'm kind of thinking there's just when you look at where the rankings are now, you have a couple of options where Lorenzo Style is kind of one that comes to mind. Rocco Spindler is in that top 75-ish category. Obviously, those would be the ones that are closest to the ranking 5-star status.
Right.
But I don't know, Mike, do you see either of those guys getting consideration or someone who would take a meteor rise up into that top 30 or whatever it is?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, every fan base, first of all, thinks that Rivals is out to get them and drop all their recruits. Well,
rule number one is clear.
In the past 2 recruiting classes, Notre Dame had commits in the Midwest that were bumped from 4-star to 5-star status. But let's not drop that truth bomb. So Styles and Spindler are the 2. Those are the 2 I was thinking of. Maybe Buckner. All right, here's the thing: you got to look at who's playing in an all-star game. Buckner, as far as I know, he's going to play in potentially the Under Armour game. So he's not going to have a senior year, but he's going to maybe play in the Under Armour game. So for me, it's and I guess this is assuming that the media is going to have access to watching these week of practices. So who's already ranked pretty high and who's going to be at one of these all-star games where like Rivals people can go see them face to face and during that whole week of practice. So Styles is not currently committed to an All-American game, surprisingly enough. Maybe that will change. So I'm going to not go with him, but I will go with Rocco Spindler, he's ranked as a 5.9 4-star, and then there's 6.0 4-star, then 6.1 is a 5-star. So he's still got a couple more notches to go, but if he has a dominating week at the Under Armour All-American Bowl practices, and again, assuming that, the media is able to be there. I don't know what that's going to look like in late December, early January. Fingers crossed, because I always go to the Under Armour practices. But he's the one that I could see potentially being a 5-star.
Well, there you have it, Mike. I think that's all we have time for. We appreciate you guys listening. Please rate, subscribe to the podcast wherever you find your podcast. Leave us 5 stars and nice comments if you like what we hear. We'll owe you forever. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Till then, take care.